Welcome to Level Up with Winnie Sun.
Well, hello, everybody, and I hope that you're having a beautiful Wednesday. It's so nice to be here with you again. A very busy week. But you know what? Let's start with a financial update because I know that you're really going to want to join in on our discussion pertaining to what we discussed today on our tweet chat. But before we get there, let's talk about the financial markets. In fact, today was sort of what we call sort of a flat day and sort of negative in some ways because unfortunately the Dow closed down 97 points and the NASDAQ also joined down 31 points as we saw a lot of names that were used to doing well actually not do so well. One of them being Netflix, Slack, and Chipotle. Now, one stock that actually made the news, and this is something that I really want to make sure that you heard, that unfortunately didn't perform quite well was AstraZeneca. And the reason why this should be important for you to know is because this company actually has a coronavirus vaccine in the test. And the reason why the stock got pulled down is unfortunately in their test, one of the individuals, one of the volunteers taking the coronavirus vaccine from them actually passed away. And so because of that, investors were quite concerned. And this is yet another important reminder of why it's very important that you be careful when you invest, especially if you're going to make a very concentrated investment in a certain industry. Now, on other names that did well, Bitcoin did very well today because PayPal is getting into crypto. So let's see where that heads. Other names, WD-40 did very well, Teradyne, and iRobot. Now, one thing that was interesting too is these names are not the names that you traditionally hear about doing well each and every day. You know, the names that we talk about like Amazon and Apple and Alphabet and whatnot. So this is yet another reminder that if you're not a specialist in all these different industries and you want to be diversified, which you really do want to be diversified, it's important to seek out money managers and mutual funds and ETFs that have that diversification, because this is a great example of a day where the market actually dropped, but yet a lot of names did very, very well. In fact, WD-40 up over 17% today alone. So on that note, these are things for you to keep in mind. And right after the market closed, let me tell you, Chipotle, they actually exceeded profit expectations and yet the stock went down. So, you know, anything could happen today. That's just the name of the game. If you're going to invest, you can invest for long-term things to really pay attention to. And, you know, today I think is a great example of what things you need to be paying attention to, because today's tweet chat, in fact, those of you who joined us on Twitter and followed us, as you know, our tweet chat is every Wednesday, or pretty much every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific here on the West Coast, 2 p.m. on the East Coast. And today we have two, you know, I consider them both friends. We had two lead panelists today that led the discussion on a very important topic. So let's bring in Melanie Benson, who's joining us today. And Melanie, I know you're here on the West Coast. You're in LA right now, right?
Yep, just outside of LA.
Just outside of LA. And let's bring in Lori Andy, which I'm excited because I actually got a chance to not only spend some time with Lori before the pandemic, but we actually had lunch, Lori, before it all got crazy, huh? We were so fortunate. So Lori is also joining us from the West Coast. Lori's joining us from Long Beach. Yeah. And so let's talk about this, ladies. We had a really big tweet chat today. Once again, I haven't seen the numbers yet, but what I always get excited about is not so much the numbers, but just so much engagement. And I think today's topic really hit home for a lot of people. Melanie, if I could ask you to sort of jump in on here. Let's talk about today's topic, about leaning in, right? And for a lot of us, that means different things. When you think about leaning in, what does that mean to you, Melanie?
Well, I think, especially our topic being about challenging times right now, leaning in means we don't run from it. We lean into what this challenge is, what this opportunity is. And I like leaning into my superpowers. I want my clients to lean into their superpowers, but I also want people to learn to lean into the challenges because there's always opportunities inside of them. And I think there's so much that came out of today's tweet chat, people giving examples of how they're doing that. It was really exciting to see that there is good things happening right now, even though a lot of people are confronted with some unexpected twists and turns from 2020.
A lot of unexpected twists and turns for 2020. That's like, I feel like that's a statement of 2020. Lori, I know you've also experienced a lot of changes right now. She's actually tweeting us from her beautiful backyard in Long Beach. Um, Lori, I know you've had to change your business. How has this resonated? Today's topic resonated with you? Okay, we're being challenged by Lori's connection, but that's okay. One thing I will say is
I've had my entire family and have to really hard with getting an activity because everybody's on Zoom calls.
Absolutely. Everybody's on Zoom calls. I know, Melanie, like my kids downstairs are certainly on their Zoom calls, and it gets hairy. I mean, one thing that I think was important from our discussion was just how many people have had to pivot. We saw many of the community come on Twitter talking about how their companies, maybe their business model had to have changes. And then one of the surprises I saw was a lot of people who are self-employed or even employed at very large companies found themselves having to pivot. And Melanie, that's sort of a big word, right? Pivot. I think we had a lot of discussions on that. When you think of pivot, what do you think? Have you had to pivot in your own business? I know you have a very successful podcast too.
Yeah. Well, I've been in business 20 years this year. And so I've had several pivots. It seems like every 10 years we've had some kind of major industry or world event that's causing things to get rattled up. And so when I think of pivoting, I think you rapidly change direction. And I don't know that we all have to pivot. I think many people did have to pivot, especially if doing in-person events or in-person trainings and things like that. Hello. I know that pivoting isn't always the answer, though. And there's a moment where we have to realize, do I need to be flexible and adapt? And we use this word lean into my offering, my message, really like go deeper. Or do I need to change the direction because where I'm focused, what I'm doing is not something that's going to work based on the conditions of the market? So I think that's an important question. That's really an individual question, Winnie. And I think a lot of people need to look at that. Do I pivot or do I get flexible? I mean, my plan completely blew up this year, right? So I do a lot of in-person speaking. I do a lot of events. And luckily, I have a very virtually based company that I could very quickly shift gears to being more virtual. But
and you have the experience. I mean, you have the tools. Like you said, you're a podcaster, so you've already had the equipment and pivoting to do virtual events. It sounds like you're doing very well. I mean, you also have, I know also you have a very productive mastermind that you have to get to after this. I do think that the pivot, it's a big world. Now I'll share with you something that's really relatable, I think, for all of us. Obviously we've had to make changes in our professional life one way or the other. Sometimes we just have to do that sort of deep dive of what we really like to do, what we enjoy to do, and then making sure that it also gives us a fulfillment as well as financial fulfillment. Like it just can't just solve one thing for us, right? Interesting enough, today after the market closed, Quibi, which is, many of you have heard of that. Quibi was actually started by Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was part of DreamWorks Animation. They only survived 6 months during this pandemic, and they've had to shut their doors. I mean, so I think sometimes we think, well, you have to be really, nimble when you're small, but you also have to be really nimble when you're big too. And take those chances sometimes. You know what? Let's tackle some of the questions if you want. I want to share with our viewers today who maybe didn't get a chance to participate in our tweet chat, just to show you some of the questions that came about and some of the answers. I want to say a quick hello to Anthony, our good friend Anthony, who's a very active member on our tweet chat. He's actually joining us today live as well here and viewing us. Let's take a question. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. So question 2 was, some of the most successful people credit their success to being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Challenges can be intimidating. How do you prepare, Melanie, to be comfortable with discomfort? What are your best tips for leading into challenges? And, Bernie actually answered. Bernie's very active in our group, and he says, I always tell myself that change and challenges will happen no matter what. You just have to be flexible, understanding, and keeping an open mind. So, Millie, how do you feel about that? You agree with that?
I do. I think a big part of it is everything starts in the mindsets, your thoughts, and a lot of the conversation. And this is what I believe is we have to tell ourselves that being uncomfortable isn't a bad thing. It's actually just means we're stretching and we're growing. And, I often hear people say, if I focus on the outcome and I stop thinking so much about the steps being uncomfortable, I can get through those steps easier. And I think that's what we're facing right now. It's like sometimes we're going to do stuff that's not that exciting to do, but it's so necessary to get to the outcome. And that's where all the good feelings are.
Agree. And I'll share with this. I think many of you could relate to this. I feel like, when we're younger and we're growing up, like we have a lot of disappointments in life. I even see with my 11-year-old, like, too much homework, or maybe his, siblings are giving him grief and whatnot. But as adults, we have to go through that too. We have our disappointments and our challenges, and things just don't work out the way that we hoped. I mean, you might be sitting here watching and thinking, I expected to be somewhere else at this age. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. But I do feel like we are stronger and better because of our challenges in life, right? And it makes us more nimble. And I think we've used that word a couple of times, but also makes us, I don't know, what am I looking for, Melanie? It just makes us tougher, right? Too?
Yeah, more resilient.
Resilient, you're right. Especially going through right now. Melanie, maybe you could share with us, like, have you had an experience where it was quite disappointing, or maybe some sort of struggle that has led you to where you are now?
Well, having been in business 20 years, I think we could safely say I've had way more failures and disappointments and frustrations than I have had successes. And I think if you talk to anyone who's really honest and transparent about their path, they're going to say the same thing. You don't get to major success without having some really epic fails along the way. And I've had several. I've had some ones that were so painful that it was everything I could do to pick myself back up and say, you're not giving up. We're going to keep going. But it's in those moments. And I think this is what's for me, because I mentor and guide other expertpreneurs. And anytime part of what we do is mentoring or guiding or leading others, if we can tap back into that moment and recognize, you know what, there's somebody who needs what I do today. There's somebody who needs what it is that I build. There's somebody who needs that service I provide, and make it bigger than just us. It's so much easier to put those failed attempts into perspective. And I don't know, Winnie, I always took great comfort in recognizing if you're successful, you've had major failures. So if you're not failing enough, you're probably not pushing past and taking enough bold leaps and challenging yourself to accomplish new things.
I love that. And Lena is saying so good. And I agree, Lena. Melanie is so good. It is so true. I do think that you're right. You need to embrace the failures. And I think you need to fail quite a bit, in order to reach success. But one thing I will add, I think one of the blessings of failing and having struggle in life is I think you have a sense of humility, of not giving up, and realizing and having that empathy and that gratefulness when something does go right. Because I always believe that you need to know bad to know good, right? You need to know struggle to know success. So I love this. This is great. Okay, so for those of you who didn't join us on Tweetchat, once again, you can still do this. You can actually jump on Twitter, do a search for #WinnieSun. You can see all the tweets that occurred today. And we also do a summary after each Tweetchat. So if you don't have a chance to read through all the answers, those are the highlights. And you know what? Don't be shy. Next time, join us on another Wednesday. We'd love to hear from you as well. So let's share another question. I think these are really hopeful for so many people. So we wanted to extend it because we want to hear more from Melanie on this. All right, ambition isn't a bad word. When it comes to goals, what are your beliefs to being bold? What practices help you live up to your full potential? Melanie, your answer we love. Perfect quote. To accomplish great things, we must not only act, but also dream, but not only plan, but also believe. Amazing quote. And you got to talk more about this, Melanie. Tell us why this inspired you.
Well, we were talking about failures earlier, and about 5 or 6 years ago, I was on the kind of coming out of a failed attempt, a failure that was really painful for me. And I felt I felt stagnant. I felt that sense of paralysis when you don't know what you do want to do, but where you've been isn't really working. It's not what you want to do anymore. And I decided that it was time to take a bold leap. And that meant I wanted to shake things up. I was going to make a big pivot. I was going to radically shift my message and really step into a bolder version of myself. And I knew I couldn't achieve that next level success the same way I'd gotten where I was up until that moment. And so I did something kind of out of my box. I did a 5-day online challenge. I'd never done one before. I had no idea what I was doing. I created a new message and I was teaching people about taking bold, setting bold goals and taking big, bold action and not having to know how everything was going to work. And so that's where that quote comes in. You first have to believe in something enough to want to do scary things, because doing scary things isn't always our most natural state of being, right? And
Absolutely.
taking risks is not for all of us. So you have to start with that belief. You have to make a commitment. You can't just be interested. Interested people don't do hard things. They do what's comfortable. So if you're committed, you're going to do what it takes. If you're interested, you're going to do what's comfortable. And trust me, success is not usually comfortable. So that's the quote, and that's the story behind it. And what's happened is I've created a whole platform and a whole body of work teaching people to amplify the results by taking bold leaps. It's one of the questions I ask every guest on Amplify Your Success. And it's really fun hearing how pretty much everybody's had to do something really bold and really scary to get to success.
I love that. Well, let's ask all our audience members. I want you to think about that. I mean, Melanie's question is great. What's something bold that you've done and what are you really proud of? Melanie, this is great. Those of you who are joining us, once again, we're sort of doing a really short recap on our tweet chat today. Join us and check out the discussion because the questions are still out there. You can actually still answer those questions even though the tweet chat is no longer live. The answers still continue. And we actually have a lot of people join us and answer those questions throughout the week. We are the largest business tweet chat on social media. You can join us right on Twitter, search for hashtag Winnie Sun, and you get to meet and communicate with leaders such as Melanie, as Lori, who unfortunately she had a little bit of technical difficulty, but Lori is amazing. You'll want to follow her as well as all the other members of the community. So come in. I always say, when people are a little shy, I said, just come and see what the communication talk is about and jump in when you feel comfortable. But I will promise you'll be hard-fetched to find a nicer group of people. I really believe that literally the nicest people on social media come to our tweet chat at some point in their life. Melanie, I know we've covered a couple questions. I know there's a lot more that I would love to get answers from you, but I also know that, you've got a very important class to get to. So with that, I want to just take a moment and ask, what's the best way that people can stay in touch with you? And maybe you could share with us some of the exciting things that you've got going on that people might want to learn about.
Sure. Thank you. Well, as always, I would love to invite you to Amplify Your Success podcast, amplifyyoursuccesspodcast.com. We're on all the major platforms. I get to talk to the most amazing people. And Winnie, as we were going through today, and I'm like, we got to get you on to talk about the power of tweet chats, because I think Twitter chats are so profoundly powerful for social media connection and leadership positioning. And I have a resource, if it's okay to share. It might be a great place for people to start, especially if you're finding that you're looking for some creative ways to get out of the box. And if you're a service-based professional, you're building a business around your expertise in some way, shape, or form, chances are we're going to bump into some revenue challenges somewhere along the way. So I have a resource. Oh, there I am. Look at that. Thanks for having me up there. I have a resource called yourrevenuerush.com, and it's a toolkit. It's just some ideas of how you can kind of get a quick start of cash flowing into your business with some creative out of the box ideas, or maybe some things you've known about but you haven't been doing. So that's a great resource to get started to learn about what we're doing here too.
Taking a bold approach. Certainly, Melanie, very, very helpful. Thank you so much for leading our discussion today on Twitter. I think so many people enjoyed that conversation. And those of you who want to join us again, of course, be able to also engage with Melanie even after the chat, definitely join us. We average about 150 million impressions per hour. We are the largest business tweet chat on social media. We tackle topics, all business related, entrepreneur topics, social media, branding, marketing, things that will help you get from where you are today to the place that you would like to be in the future, as well as personal finance. And we also have really special chats where we actually invite leaders in the media and all different industries to be able to come and have a discussion. So I know you love Melanie, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to want to come back so that you can continue to share your insight and share your boldness. I mean, I'm inspired by Melanie. This whole talk of boldness is, I'm gonna get my bold on.
Yeah, I call it own your bold. So
own
it's
your
like,
bold. I love
own your
it.
bold.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I want to invite you to come back tomorrow. As you know, the show will be back tomorrow at 1:30 Pacific on the West Coast, 4:30 Eastern. We have a really special program scheduled for you as well tomorrow. So huge thank you to Melanie for being here. And I'll see all of you tomorrow. Take care now.